Welcome to another episode of NIF Australia's Israeli election preview. Israelis begin voting in a few hours, so here are some last-minute things to think about. And remember, we have our elections event coming up on Wednesday night. We'll be joined by former Knesset Deputy Speaker Nomi Chazan to crunch all the results and hear about what happens next. In this episode, we wanted to focus on the two frontrunners, the current Prime Minister, Likud's Benjamin Netanyahu, and Benny Gantz, leader of the Blue and White Party and a former IDF Chief of Staff who was appointed by Netanyahu himself. Since the start of the campaign, Netanyahu has sought to portray Gantz and his running mate Yair Lapid as leftists, using it as a slur to try to limit his electoral appeal. Now, it's definitely true that the middle of Israel's political map has moved to the right, so perhaps that's what makes Gantz look like a leftist. And he staked out some fairly liberal positions, like calling for a more open policy around prayer at the Kotel and invoking Yitzhak Rabin in his call for a regional peace. But he's also done a few things that will make you question just how leftist or even centrist he is. In his campaign ads, he's bragged about the destruction he wrought on Gaza as Chief of Staff and given anti-two-state advocates and former Netanyahu advisors top spots on his list. Lots of moderate, left-of-centre voters are placing faith in Gantz to correct Israel's course away from its current right-wing bent. In reality, we don't know all that much about his political views. His start to the campaign was marked by an almost militant aversion to stating his policies. And when he did finally speak up, his message was distilled by Haaretz correspondent Anshel Pfeffer as meaner than Netanyahu, but cleaner than him. Netanyahu has been a destructive figure for Israeli democracy, attacking the courts, attacking minorities, and attacking civil society. He's breached convention, and possibly the law, by refusing to stand aside in the face of indictments for corruption and breach of trust. As we come to the end of the campaign, it's interesting to think about just how different Gantz and Netanyahu are. If the main difference ends up being that Gantz respects the rule of law and doesn't take every opportunity to go after Israel's Palestinian citizens or leftists, is that enough of an improvement to hope for a Gantz victory? Even though Israelis vote today, it'll be around a month before we know who will become Israel's next Prime Minister. Gantz and Netanyahu are fighting to get the most number of seats, but neither of them will get a majority of the 120-seat Knesset on their own. Instead, they're going to win about 30 seats each, setting up a battle to see who's in the best position to form a governing coalition with smaller parties. The race to see who gets the most number of seats is important, but it's not what they're ultimately aiming for. They'll both be casting their minds back to the 2009 election, where Tzipi Livni, running as the head of the Kadima party, won 29 seats to Netanyahu and Likud's 28, but she wasn't able to secure support from enough parties to form government. After the election, each party head will nominate the president who they'd like to form government. President Ruby Rivlin takes it under advice and will appoint whomever he thinks will have the best chance to command a majority in the Knesset. And this is where it will get interesting. What if Gantz wins 4 more seats than Netanyahu, but doesn't have the numbers to form a coalition? He's won a plurality of votes, but if right-wing parties get more seats than centre and left-wing parties, he won't be left with many options. As it stands a few hours out from voting beginning, it's that possibility of Gantz getting the most number of seats, but Netanyahu having the easiest time forming a coalition that perhaps is the most likely. Another interesting option could be that Gantz and Likud, neither able to form a stable coalition, are forced to form a national unity government together, perhaps with Labour and Kulanu, the two next most moderate parties. Gantz has left this option open, speaking about a closed but not locked door. But members of his own party may force him to make Netanyahu step aside while corruption charges are pending against him. Of course, it's also a possibility that there'll be a stalemate between the parties, and after a few months of Gantz and Netanyahu having a go, no one can form power. What happens then is anyone's guess. That's all we have for now. Stay tuned to our Facebook and Twitter pages for more updates, and remember to come along tomorrow night to hear Nomi Chazan distill all of the results and tell us what she thinks will happen next. Thanks for watching.